Okay, imagine placing a bet, but we're not talking a few bucks. We're talking $44 billion. A bet so huge it could literally reshape a town, take on a global monopoly, and yeah, navigate the crazy waters of a new Cold War. This is Samsung's reality right now, and it's one of the biggest corporate gambles you'll ever see. Just let that number sink in for a second. 44 billion. The chips they're betting with aren't the plastic kind either. They're silicon. And the casino? It's not Vegas. It's a small, pretty unassuming town right in the middle of Texas.
So what is Samsung really up to here? I mean, is this just some big government-subsidized project, a desperate move to catch up to a rival, or is it one of the smartest, most calculated geopolitical plays we've ever witnessed? Well, the answer is kind of all of the above.
Look, this is so much more than just building another factory. For Samsung, this is about survival in a world that's splitting apart, with technology right at the center of that split. And to really get why they're making this enormous bet, we've got to peel back the layers. And we're going to start with Samsung itself.
Right, so to really understand this $44 billion bet, you have to understand Samsung. It's this sprawling giant, right? It makes everything from the phone in your pocket to the tiny memory chips ticking away inside of it. And that very structure, it's both their greatest strength and their most dangerous weakness. So in the chip world, most companies do one thing or the other. You've got fabless designers like NVIDIA who just dream up the chips, and then you've got pure-play manufacturers or foundries like TSMC who actually build them. But Samsung? They're different. They're an IDM, an integrated device manufacturer. They design and make their own chips, like the Exynos processors in their own Galaxy phones. They're basically their own #1 customer. And that brings us to the core problem here. See, TSMC is like the Switzerland of the chip world. They're a neutral party that builds chips for everyone. But Samsung, well, Samsung competes directly with its own potential customers, like Apple or Google or even Tesla. So that creates this massive conflict of interest. I mean, if you're Apple, are you really going to hand over your most secret next-gen chip designs to your biggest rival? Probably not. And that single question, that's been Samsung's Achilles heel for years. It's a huge reason they've been trailing TSMC. But here's the thing you have to remember. This move into Texas isn't coming out of nowhere. No way. Samsung has been playing the long game here since 1996. For almost 30 years, they've been building up this local fortress of supply chains, a skilled workforce, and, political connections. This gives them a massive home field advantage over rivals like TSMC, who are just now trying to build everything from scratch over in Arizona. Okay, let's dive into the next layer of this story. Because this $44 billion bet, it's not just about corporate competition. It's a direct response to some seriously intense geopolitical pressure. To really feel the urgency behind this Texas move, we need to look about 8,000 miles away to a city called Xi'an in China. Samsung has this massive manufacturing complex there that used to be a crown jewel, but today, it's become a monumental liability. Just think about how dependent they are on this one spot. A single facility in China produces up to 40% of Samsung's entire global supply of NAND flash memory. That's the storage inside basically everything, our phones, our laptops, data centers, you name it. And it's located smack dab in the middle of the US-China tech war. Not a good place to be. So the US has put these really strict export controls in place to try and cut off China's access to advanced chips. Now, Samsung has some temporary waivers to keep its China plant running, but that constant uncertainty is just brutal for business. As one source put it, the threat of losing those waivers hangs over them like the sword of Damocles. In fact, Samsung actually blamed a shocking 56% drop in its profits directly on these US restrictions. And this is where that new plant in Taylor, Texas, becomes Samsung's shield. It creates a secure onshore supply chain for their most advanced chips, totally insulated from that geopolitical mess. Now, Samsung can walk into a meeting with any American company and give them an ironclad guarantee. Don't worry, your supply chain is safe. It's made in America. But this isn't just a defensive play. Make no mistake. The Texas expansion is a direct offensive assault on Samsung's ultimate rival, the undisputed king of chip manufacturing, TSMC. For the last decade, honestly, the advanced chip market hasn't really been a competition. It's been a one-company show. And this timeline, it tells a brutal story.
In just 5 years, the gap between TSMC and Samsung went from being wide to being a massive chasm. Samsung's market share just collapsed.
And here's the reality today. TSMC controls almost 68% of the market. Samsung is left with under 8%. It's total domination. It's a David versus Goliath situation, except Goliath just keeps getting bigger and stronger.
So you have to ask, why is the gap so huge? Well, it all comes down to technical problems. For years, Samsung has been just plagued by low yields. That's the percentage of good, usable chips they get from each silicon wafer. Remember when Qualcomm used Samsung for one of its Snapdragon processors? The chip had all sorts of performance issues. The very next year, they switched to TSMC and, poof, the problems were gone. Things like that have absolutely shattered customer trust. And this is where the Texas plan took a really dramatic turn. See, the factory was originally supposed to make 4nm chips. The problem? TSMC was already way ahead and had that whole market locked down, and a brand new factory with no customers is, well, a catastrophe. So Samsung made a bet the farm pivot. They're scrapping the 4nm plan entirely and trying to leapfrog a whole generation, straight to 2nm tech. It's a huge gamble. If you can't win today's war, you bet everything you have on winning tomorrow's.
But, a grand strategy on paper can fall apart pretty quick when it meets reality. And for this new Texas fab, there are some serious cracks starting to show in the foundation.
The most obvious problem is the timeline. Production was supposed to kick off in 2024. Then it got pushed to 2025. And now, the best case scenario is sometime in 2026. These constant delays, they are a huge red flag that something is wrong.
And the reason for the delays is the most alarming part of this whole thing. As this executive told Nikkei Asia, there's just a stunning lack of customers. Samsung is apparently so hesitant to install its incredibly expensive equipment until it actually has firm orders locked in. So why aren't customers lining up? Well, it's that old curse again, yield. Reports are claiming that the yields on Samsung's next-gen technology, the very same tech plan for Texas, are hovering somewhere between a shocking 10 and 50%. For a customer like Apple or Nvidia, that level of unpredictability is just completely unacceptable. No way. And this really reveals the fatal flaw in their entire geopolitical strategy. The whole idea was that companies would flock to a secure American-made chip. The fact that they aren't lining up suggests something absolutely crucial. For these companies, the immediate, real risk of using Samsung's unproven manufacturing is seen as a much bigger problem than the more distant, abstract risk of a conflict involving Taiwan.
And that leaves us with the central question of this entire $44 billion story. For the biggest tech companies in the world, what actually matters more, where a chip is built or how well it's built? For right now, the market's answer seems painfully clear.